So for the 5th episode of Season 3 of the Orville New Horizons, we get A Tale of Two Topas. So this is a follow-up of the previous season's episode that gave us quite the insight into Moclan culture. and one of the episodes that took a very serious tone, not just into the Kalon War and all that. Even though the comedy was still very much present, which it almost isn't in this season, which I think is a mistake at this point. But this was the follow of the story, which was this interesting means by which you deal with this aspect of sexual identity that is apparently the current obsession in our times at the moment. But they did it in this completely upside down backwards way where the Moclans have decided they don't like females, so everyone has to be male. And so whenever you have a daughter, she has to immediately be given a gender reassignment. And but it's an alien culture and all this sort of stuff. Then to come to find out, no, there are some females who survived and they're ostracized, and all this, and the Moclan society is ashamed of them and all this sort of thing. And then Bortus struggles with this. This is his child, and he doesn't want to do this to her. He wants her the way she is. Whereas his mate, Clyden, turns out was female, but went through the gender reassignment and is obviously deeply ashamed of this, and is vehement that they maintain the cultural standards that they live under, and that their child be turned male, which is ultimately what happens despite a court case and everything else that they do. Bortus is just going to have to go along with this, and so it ends on that note. Wow, this is really sad and everything. Topa, who was the child's name, has grown a bit and is a part of the ship, and it knows the other crew members and everything, and strikes up a friendship with Kelly, and starts to complain like, I don't feel right and stuff. And of course Kelly knows the story. He's like, well, it's not my place to talk about this. But then it's starting to sound like the child's considering suicide. She starts, or at this point, he starts asking Isaac, what was it like to die and all this type of stuff. So Kelly's getting scared, rightfully so, and talks to Ed about it and everything. Well, we better talk to Bortus, and they do. They talk to the doctor and all this sort of stuff. Meanwhile, Clyden is like, we will absolutely not tell Toba the truth and all this sort of stuff, and that's the end of it. And it's not going to work out that well, and Kelly decides to steer the child into possibly discovering the files that'll tell the story, and she finds it. Now Kelly, we later learn that Kelly didn't directly point her to it. It turns out Bortus did. She gets a message of the password, and she's like, oh, what's this? And punches it in, and then sees the whole file, knows the whole story. So all hell breaks loose. Clyden blames Kelly for everything. Meanwhile, Toba's, I want gender reassignment surgery and stuff like that, and the doctor is saying, yeah, I can do it. But meanwhile, the union comes down on him and says, we can't interfere with their culture and stuff. And besides, once again, just like with the Krill, we have to abide by, respect their culture and norms, no matter how much we might disagree with it. We have to do that because we need that alliance, guys. We've already lost the Krill, so we need to keep the Moclans on board because the Kalon want to wipe us all out and everything. So the doctor offers to resign her commission so that she's a civilian doctor and can do whatever she wants. She's got a patient who's requesting this, and she can do that. And then Isaac steps in and says, well, I'm not really a commissioned officer at all. And he's like, what? You're not? Oh. And it's like, God. That's right. He was put there as this representative of the Kalons to observe and everything, and say, "Oh, okay." So he was never really a Union officer or anything. So he basically just downloads the procedure, and he does it. So now Topa's a girl, and she's happy and everything. The sad thing about it is Clyden never accepts this and actually tells her, "I wish you were never born." And that's the cruel, harsh reality of some of these things. And it's stressing upon it that he's choosing his cultural norms over his child, and obviously that's part of the messaging that one could derive from it. Obviously, that's why transgenderism isn't accepted and stuff like that for people who just are so strict in their beliefs that they won't respond with love and kindness and understanding and tolerance and all that, except for the problem here. She was always a girl. She was gender reassigned at birth. It's the exact opposite of it, and should have been let be what she was all along. So it doesn't quite work that way. But it speaks to that obviously Bortus is more accepting and all this sort of thing, whereas Clyden, for Clyden's own reasons and what Clyden himself, or actually herself, went through, it puts a more deeper narrative. And it's also the conclusion of it, Clyden leaves. After the last bout, it was obvious that Clyden and Bortus were not going to stay together. So of course Bortus chooses his daughter over Clyden, and that's the way it goes, So anyway, as a follow-up, it's really the only outcome that could have been. Otherwise, it's kind of like, why bother? But as the argument goes, it's similar to the abortion issue that was brought up in the previous episode, which, look, it's Seth MacFarlane. You know what side he's going to take, and yet within the presentation, whether this was intended or not, I don't know. You have the villain being I guess in this case, the pro-life position, but it contradicts the immediate position of the character at the time, where he's all upset that that daughter's being hidden and all this sort of stuff, and and then immediately turns around. Well, you never should have been born, and then now they still got him all emotional and wanting to reach out to her and everything. Make up your mind, and then that sort of thing. One of the things about with like current Star Trek, where they just flat out just state what the political campaign ad is, whereas Orville is at least trying to keep it within the context and the narrative of its allegorical tale. Very much in keeping with how Star Trek originally did. Always going back to the Vietnam episode, which it's obvious what the narrative is speaking to, but at the same time it left the argument open. There's some amount of it in here because the weird nature of it, in that this is exactly backwards of what the actual situation is that we deal with in real life. And then the previous episode where it was abortion it's contradicted within the character's narrative, so it's all a bit clumsy within it, and that's a bit of the problem. But your choice of which characters say what, I guess, is what the overall intent is there. As for this, is supposed to be something to clue people in for more sympathies for people dealing with gender dysphoria and that nature. It doesn't quite work, but it's also like what the X-Men is representative of racism and whatnot, and yet there are people with powers that could wipe out humanity. It comes across as quite monstrous. Doesn't quite work as part of sympathy in the nature of it. Whereas here you have this this poor girl who through no choice of her own was manipulated into being something. The idea here would be, well, culture does it, and this was culture making her be something she's not. But she really wasn't a boy. She never was. They had to make her be one. That's not the same thing as being born with the genitalia and physical aspects and whatnot. As to what are the causes of gender dysphoria, we still don't completely understand or know, and that's true of a lot of the elements of psychology and from all kinds of aspects of life. Whereas here, it's an actual forced thing that happened within the narrative of the story. But ultimately, I guess it was just, can't you yield to compassion or whatnot in this scenario is the ultimate message for it. But at the same time, they still had their own problems with their war. It's this alien culture, and it's you're not a part of it, and it's none of your business. And this is obviously Kelly, sticking her nose into it. But then the child came to her, and it's like, what would you do in her position? You'd probably do the same thing, and plus she was getting scared, about what's going to happen here. And so she was more or less forced to stick her nose into someone else's business, So in that instant, a powerful episode, sure, and better handled than that other show. You can imagine what would they do? Oh, what they would do. But speaking more to the problems for Orville that it has now, it's still too slow. It's still, I think the humor removal was a mistake. There should be more of it. There's some of it in here, a few scenes here and there. But it almost comes across like they forgot to do it or something. I don't know. It's not enough to push me out, but I think it's a problem for the casual viewer and someone who might have seen the previous season. Oh yeah, I'll look at this one, and it's like, well, it's not as good as the last one, and I think that's a detriment to the potential for a fourth season. So I think it's a mistake. I'm all in. I'll keep watching it, but I think that was a mistake on their part. Understanding the seriousness, coming more into it, because they really want to do Star Trek. And of course, after the Kalan War, things got a lot more serious. But I think the two can coincide, and they were doing that. So I'm not sure exactly what happened, or what the thinking was, but I think it was a mistake. But hopefully, it's good enough to win another season. But we'll just have to see. But I've been hearing that from others, and I can't completely argue with them on it. And if that's enough for them to say, well, I'll pass, then so be it, I guess. So it's unfortunate, but you gotta, be aware of the times you're in, even when it might not necessarily be fair. It is what you have to navigate. All right, we'll see what they do next week.